Andrew Johnson, 17th President of the United States. Andrew Johnson was the President of the United States from 1865 to 1869. He was born in Raleigh, North Carolina in 1808. Andrew suddenly became president after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. As president, he found himself facing an incredibly difficult job. He had to bring a badly damaged nation back together after its first war. Picture of Grant and Lee at Appomattox. The Civil War ended on April 9, 1865, when Southern General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Northern General Ulysses S. Grant. Everyone was relieved, but the country was left in a real mess. More than 600,000 lives had been lost during the Civil War. Cities and towns, crops and livestock had been destroyed as well. Illustration of former slaves celebrating their freedom. No one was quite sure where or how 4 million former slaves would live or what their rights would be. Some Northerners wanted Southern leaders to be punished, while others thought they should be forgiven. The process of fixing up the country was called Reconstruction. Picture of Richmond, Virginia after the war. Abraham Lincoln had hoped the rebellious Southern states would be brought back into the Union smoothly. Abe Lincoln was a strong leader and a genius at getting people to agree with each other. But Abe never got the chance to see if his plans would work. Unfortunately, it turned out that President Johnson wasn't as skilled a leader as Lincoln had been. Andrew Johnson was stubborn and racially prejudiced. As president, he kept fighting with the U.S. Congress over how to handle Reconstruction, and very little was accomplished. It's a picture of his childhood home in Raleigh. When Andrew Johnson was growing up, his family was very poor. They rented a dirt floor cabin that was on the property of a hotel. Andrew's father worked all kinds of odd jobs at the hotel to scrape up enough money to feed his family. Sadly, he died when Andrew was only 3 years old. Now the Johnsons were really poor. Mrs. Johnson did her best to raise her 2 sons. When Andrew was 14, he and his brother Bill were apprenticed to James Selby, the owner of a local tailor shop. Andrew learned to be an excellent tailor, even though he didn't like being stuck working in the shop all day. Here's a cartoon. Andrew did enjoy certain days, though, when readers would stop by. Readers were sometimes brought in to help pass the time in workshops. Andrew loved listening to the novels, plays, famous speeches, and newspaper stories that were read to the workers. Andrew had never spent even one day in school. Now, as a teenager, he had a great desire to learn to read on his own. Some of the readers were kind enough to help Andrew learn to read. After 2 years of apprenticing in Mr. Selby's shop, Andrew and his brother decided to run away. The boys felt they were ready to make livings on their own. Andrew and Bill had broken the law, though. Mrs. Johnson had promised that her sons would apprentice until they were 21 years old. Mr. Selby was furious and sent out a wanted notice offering $10 for the boys' return. After a while, Andrew returned home and apologized to his boss. Mr. Selby didn't accept Andrew's apology, however, and hinted that he might try to get even with him. Andrew thought it might be a good idea to leave North Carolina. He convinced his mother, brother, and new stepfather to pack up and find a better life on the new frontier. So in 1826, the Johnson family headed west. They stopped in Greenville, Tennessee, where Andrew had some great luck there. On his first day there, 17-year-old Andrew met Eliza McArdle, the girl who would become his wife. He found a job as a tailor and even found a place for his family to live. A year after he arrived in Greenville, Andrew married Isa McArdle. Isa was the perfect wife for Andrew. She helped him make up for all the schooling her husband had missed. First, Eliza taught Andrew to write. Then she taught him arithmetic and more reading skills. Eliza was a good businesswoman. With her help, Andrew opened his own tailor shop, and soon he became very successful. This is a picture of his tailor shop in Greenville, Tennessee. Andrew's tailor shop became a gathering place for local townspeople. They enjoyed discussing politics and news of the day with Andrew. He always felt that wealthy Tennessee landowners looked down on people with small farms and tradesmen like him. Andrew believed that more working-class people should be elected to government jobs and help run their towns and states. In 1828, Andrew decided to run for town alderman. At the age of 19, he won his first election. This was at the beginning of a very successful life in politics for Andrew. 2 years later, Andrew was elected mayor of Greenville. He went on to be elected to the Tennessee state legislature. Eventually, he was elected to the U.S. Congress, first as a state representative, then as a senator. Between his terms in Congress, Andrew Johnson even served as governor of Tennessee. Andrew was never afraid to speak his mind about the rights of everyday working people. Many of Andrew's rich, well-educated opponents didn't like him at all. They made fun of Andrew's unschooled manners behind his back. Small-town and backwoods people always liked Andrew, though. When Andrew Johnson became a U.S. Senator, the United States was about to split apart over what to do about slavery. Northerners wanted to end slavery, while Southerners wanted to keep their slaves and even spread slavery into new territories. Southern states were even willing to leave the Union to get their way. Andrew was from Tennessee, a Southern state. He had no desire to end slavery, but he definitely didn't want Southern states to secede from or leave the Union. Just before the Civil War started, Senator Johnson frequently gave rousing speeches about the importance of keeping the United States together as one country. Andrew Johnson always said he loved the U.S. Constitution and would give his life to keep the United States together as one country. People from the northern states thought Andrew was a great hero. People from the South thought he was a traitor. Andrew Johnson's life was now often at risk. Once, a group of angry Southerners boarded Andrew's train and threatened to hang him. Somehow, Andrew got out of the difficulty, but he and his family were always seemed to be in danger. Because of Andrew's loyalty to the Union, President Lincoln thought Andrew might make a great vice presidential choice. In 1864, when Lincoln ran for a second four-year term, Andrew Johnson was his running mate. Abe Lincoln and Andrew Johnson easily won the election of 1864. Almost immediately, a series of important events took place. A month after Abe and Andrew were sworn in as president and vice president, the Civil War ended. Then, only 5 days later, a horrible tragedy happened. An angry Southern actor named John Wilkes Booth shot President Lincoln. Picture of Lincoln on his deathbed. Abraham Lincoln died the next morning on April 15, 1865. Later that day, Andrew Johnson became the 17th president of the United States. Andrew didn't have much time to think things over. Right away, he had to figure out how to rebuild his country. Unfortunately, President Johnson totally started off on the wrong foot. When he began his new job, the members of Congress were in recess. There was no one to check up on the president, so he did pretty much what he wanted. Some of the things Johnson did angered members of Congress. First of all, President Johnson pardoned a lot of Southerners for the part they'd taken in the war. He also ignored the rights of newly freed slaves. Many former slaves were being treated the same way they'd been treated before the Civil War. When Congress came back into session a few months later, many congressmen were very upset. From then on, Congress and the president fought constantly. President Johnson didn't believe the U.S. government should be responsible for helping or protecting former slaves. He thought that that job should be left up to each state. Most members of Congress disagreed. On one occasion, Congress wanted to pass a civil rights law that would protect the former slaves. President Johnson vetoed or rejected the law. Then members of Congress overruled the president's veto. Finally, the leader of the House of Representatives, Thaddeus Stevens, said President Johnson should be impeached or charged with serious misbehavior. Andrew Johnson ended up being the first president to be impeached. Picture of Thaddeus Stevens. When a president is impeached, the House of Representatives brings charges against him to the Senate. Members of the Senate then vote on whether to convict the president of any crimes. In this case, the Senate did not convict Johnson of any crimes. If it had, he would have been removed from office. In spite of all the problems Andrew was having, one good thing was accomplished while he was president. In 1867, President Johnson's Secretary of State, William H. Seward, bought 500,000 square miles, about 1,295 square kilometers of land, from the Tsar of Russia. The region would someday become the state of Alaska. At first, Seward was criticized for wasting money on an area that seemed to have just ice, snow, and polar bears. Before long, though, people realized Seward had made a great deal. When it came time to nominate a candidate for the next election, Andrew Johnson didn't stand a chance. Members of Congress felt he was totally unfit to be president. Voters pretty much agreed. Most people thought that the stubborn, self-centered president had kept the country from being rebuilt. In 1869, Andrew Johnson left the White House and headed back to Tennessee. Years later, he was elected a U.S. Senator from Tennessee. He died before his term ended on July 31st, 1875.